what are the three problems that we primarily have? Discovery, interactivity, and monetization. In Podcasting 2.0 is we've just added some new features. They're called tags, but let's call them features. This new feature in Podcasting 2.0, I can insert my image into my RSS feed and boom, suddenly I can discover what Neil looks like. So stop going after the mass, focus on the niche and focus on the people who support you, and that will get you a real business. And AI to me, by the way, stands for assisted intelligence, not artificial. And it's that assisted element that I love rather than artificial, which I really think is a misnomer.
Welcome back to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. I've been podcasting since 2019. I started my first show about the country that's now my home, Vietnam, called A Vietnam Podcast, funnily enough. I've now worked on over 40 shows through 7 Million Bikes podcast. I've had the great pleasure of meeting some amazing people in podcasting, and today I'm going to be speaking to one of them. Now, this guy here, he is a massive proponent of podcasting 2.0. Now, I'm embarrassed to say, as a podcaster, I should know what that means. And I do a little bit. I did a little bit. And then we had a big conversation last week. And now I understand it a little bit more. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about what is podcasting 2.0. My guest today has been involved for podcasting for over 8 years. He's the co-host of the Pod News Weekly Review, which is an amazing newsletter podcast website all about podcasting that you should check out if you haven't already. And he is the creator of a new application website called TrueFans, which I was introduced to last week, which is all about value for podcasters and a new way for podcasters to get paid, which of course is what we all ultimately want. So I am very, very excited to talk today to Sam Sethi. Thank you very much for joining me today, Sam.
Hey, Neil, thank you so much for inviting me.
You are very welcome. Now, the biggest question I have for you, and I hope lots of podcasters have the same question as well. What the hell is podcasting 2.0?
It's nothing very special, actually. Let's bring it back down, right? It's not a unicorn, it's not a fairy tale. It's an evolution of podcasting in its simplest form. What happened was Adam Curry, the inventor of podcasting, said, "Look, we need a few more bells and whistles, not to the audio, not to the mics, not to the recording capability, but just to help with some problems we had." Now, what are the three problems that we primarily have? Discovery, interactivity, and monetization. So people say, well, there's no problem with discovery. I keep hearing this and I go, yeah, there is. If you've got a brand new podcast and there's 4 million podcasts in the pool, how do you find your new podcast? So discovery is an issue. And one of the things in Podcasting 2.0 is we've just added some new features. They're called tags, but let's call them features. One of those features is the person tag. So I want to see a picture of Neil. I can hear his voice on the audio, but Apple have a proprietary way of doing it, but we're not all superstars. So now with the person tag, this new feature in Podcasting 2.0, I can insert my image into my RSS feed and boom, suddenly I can discover what Neil looks like. So those simple little things like chapters and transcripts are examples of small little incremental features that are added to your RSS feed that don't change the audio, but help other people find you or find content within your audio.
So that sounds simple, but I've already got questions in my head that I kind of know the answer to, and I would assume that the listener has the same questions as well. So let's go back a couple of steps. What is an RSS feed?
An RSS feed is something that you don't really need to understand. It's the underlying protocol, underlying data that is the structure of how your podcast is made. So a host over here allows you to upload your audio. So after this, you will upload the audio from this podcast to your host. They put that in a tag called the enclosure field. That's it. End of story. It's just a little field that says, this is my audio. Now, the rest of the RSS feed has little things like date published, location, maybe. It has other elements about other episodes that you've produced before. You might have little items about who the podcast is, i.e. the name, And all of that is called metadata. And that's all compressed together into one file called an RSS feed. Now, the host then publishes that to Apple, Spotify, Podcast Index, all these directories around the world. And apps like mine and others then look at these directories and go, oh, there's Neil's new episode. Boom, let me grab that. Now let me read all of the bits and pieces in that file. And then as an app, we display that in the actual application. So we then pull, oh, that's the name that Neil's given for this podcast. Great. I'll take that and I'll play that there. Oh, there's the enclosure. Right. That's what we play. Oh, okay. There's the date it was published. Let's add that. So it's just a basic structured file called RSS that we use as a means to transport the data from the host to the application.
And then what exactly is the metadata and how important is it to things like discoverability? Because there's so much you read about in podcasting, and some things I completely disagree with, some things I don't believe in, and some things I just think it's going to take too long for too small of a difference. So I'm not going to sit there for 1 hour and do something that's going to get me maybe one more listener.
Metadata is totally irrelevant if all you want to do is have your audio distributed to another user, right? That's it. Because all you want is to be able to have the name and the title of the episode and the enclosure. That's your base level. Now, everything else is you helping others try and discover you and add value to your RSS feed by giving it more rich metadata. Now, you don't have to, but I think as we get more and more people podcasting, you will want more and more metadata so that people can find you faster and quicker. So, yeah, it's worth it. But yes, you're right. Some of them are, let's say, adding some feature over here might be, oh no, no one's ever going to use that. Not for 2 years. I'm not even bothered. I'll wait. And I get that. But some of the things like chapters and transcripts and the person tag, I would do those today.
Well, that's interesting because that I just is one example that I don't do myself. And maybe it happens nowadays because it happens more automatically. But I remember in the beginning, like I looked into adding chapters. And again, it was just going to take me so long to
Mhm.
manually add chapters and make, as far as I could see, almost zero difference to, I mean, what we all want is more people listening to our amazing content.
Mhm.
Has that changed?
It has, thanks to AI. I mean, if you have a drinking game with AI, there you go. You can start drinking now. Um, AI from the host that me and James use for Pod News Weekly uh, adds chapters or suggests chapters automatically. So they have a feature called co-host. You click a button and it looks at your audio and says, oh, these seem to be the natural breaks where you would want to put a chapter in. And so we go, yep, thank you very much. There's all the chapters. It suggests 5 or 6 titles. So we pick the one that matches the transcript. They add a transcript automatically and they even add the person tag. So that is all done with one click. Suddenly we can then go and put in things like chapter art. So we can say, right, as I'm talking about this feature, instead of being the cover art of my podcast, now I can have a different piece of imagery. So if the person is looking at their phone, they will see something related. I can put a link to it. So if they want to click on it and find out more information at that chapter marker point, there you go. So yes, a year ago, even 2 years ago, it was a manual, laborious process. Today, it's a one click with most. RSS.com does it, Blueberry does it, Captivate does it. So yeah, it's not a big thing anymore.
Well, I edit with Descript, and I know you can add chapter markers on there. And I didn't even realize that those were then translated into the directories until I got a
Yeah.
message from one of my clients who I was leaving them messages using markers, not realizing that they were chapter markers. Yeah, exactly right. So they sent me a screenshot of listening on Apple Podcasts, and they're like, "These messages you've been leaving us are showing up on Apple Podcasts." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I did not know that." All right, okay, go back, delete. And now we use it for chapter markers, knowing that they are
Yes.
specifically. I did not realize there was a connect with that. I do think that podcasting, and I guess I would say this because it is my industry, is one of the biggest proponents, or not proponents, one of the biggest benefactors of AI. And it's hard. You don't even notice it. Like, so things like transcripts, and if you're new to podcasting and you're using Descript or Riverside or whatever it is that are automatically transcribing your podcast and giving you this transcript that's like 99% accurate. If you have a good accent, if you have my accent, it's about 50% accurate. But um, generally, it's nuts. Even with my accent, it's about 95% accurate. But I remember when I first started 2019, to get a transcript cost a fortune. It was like $50 or more for just 1 hour
Mhm.
of transcription. And so many tools like you're mentioning have absolutely revolutionized podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI, as you said correctly, is populating all the way through podcasting quite easily. I mean, not even there are automated voices with using AI. Some people are doing that, right? But I don't like that element of it. But with Descript, as you mentioned, the automated transcripts, but now they've got also language translation as well in beta, right? So now you can take this podcast and translate that into Vietnamese or Indian or Japanese, right? I don't know what I'd sound like with a Scottish accent, or you would sound like with a Scottish accent in Japanese. That could be brilliant. But but those tools, you're right, they were costly and very laborious to do still. There are now so many tools out there. There's Headliner, there's Eddie, I mean, I can list goes on, right? And as I said, with Buzzsprout, the tool I use for hosting, they
Mm,
have
that's
Copilot. So I think, look, the post-production part of podcasting is always the hardest bit, right? The exciting bit's this: get a mic, get a guest, have a chat. Wow, this is fun. And then you've got the, oh God, do I have to edit this thing now? Oh my God, that's going to take me forever. And then when you've edited it, you've got that next section, which is now I've got to publicize it. Now I've got to push it out. Now I've got to create clips. Now I've got to create this, that, this. So the tools, again, just as you mentioned it, because I also use Descript, they now have an automated tool option. So you click Underlord, the AI tool, and it goes through the whole of your transcript and gives you 20 clips. Okay, which one do I want to use? Which five do I want to use? Right. So that now means that AI is, and AI to me, by the way, stands for assisted intelligence,
mm.
not artificial. And it's that assisted element that I love rather than artificial, which I really think is a misnomer.
No, I love that. That's definitely 100% true. And everything we do, I tell people like AI is incredible, but it needs a human touch still. We're nowhere near close to, maybe we'll be there in 6 months. I don't know, but we're nowhere near close to just pressing a button and everything's done. My team make clips, but they are very much putting a human final touch to it and sending it to me. And I'm saying, change this by that, do this by that. It's funny you mentioned about the editing part though, because I actually love that part of it. And I do think part of it is because I love Descript. Like, I'm a massive fanboy of Descript. I had Ariel Nissenblatt on recently, and I was like fanboying just because she worked for Descript. Because I used to use GarageBand, and it's quite long and laborious. It was still fun, but Descript just makes it so much more fun to edit. And it's like the magic of editing as well. I was talking to one of my clients today, and we were explaining to her that, so what we do for video now is we mute the ums and the ahs instead of deleting them because it's going to cause, like, cuts and jumps. And she was like, "But does that not look weird?" And we were actually, no, it's the magic of editing, because when you actually say or ah, you mute it, you don't actually really notice the mouth moving because it's so small and it's so quick. And she was like, "Oh my goodness, that's amazing." I was like, "Yeah, this is so." I really get excited by editing because you can do so many things that take an audio. I love making someone sound amazing. She was
Hmm.
just like, wait, you make me sound really intelligent. And we're like, well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, we make it sound much, much better. But it does take a long time. I remember a few years ago, I sat down and wrote it down how long it took to make one episode. So we record, right, for 1 hour. But I spent about an hour before this setting up all the equipment. We've
Hmm.
obviously chatted before to set up the interview. Then you're going to edit it. Then you're going to publicize it, do all the meta tags, like you say. I worked out it takes about 8 to 10 hours to make one podcast episode. And that's where 7 Million Bikes podcast come in, because we then take that time away from you. You can pay us to do that for you, and you can get that time back to do whatever you want with. But uh, it is it's just such a fun thing to do, podcasting, I think. And I do enjoy this part, but I think I even enjoy the editing more. But going back to podcasting 2.0, so
Mm.
You mentioned about we're talking about the production side. That doesn't really change at all. Even the interview stage doesn't really change. It's that publicizing that changes, and what you mentioned about discoverability, because that's what everybody wants.
Mhm.
Everyone wants to be, everyone I talk to, you want, how can I get my podcast be found more? We all want Joe Rogan status. And I do have to tell a lot of people, that's the top 1%, and not many people are going to
No,
get
no,
there.
that's not even the top 1%, that's the top
Yeah,
0.001%,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. My other favorite is when someone asks to get like their podcast to look like the diary of a CEO, and I'm like, he spends $50,000 per episode or something like that. So do the best we
Mhm.
can, but just be aware that you're not paying us $50,000 per episode. He has, I think, 8 people on his team per episode.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean, the perception is just him rocking up to a mic and just chatting with some mates is totally a misnomer. I mean,
Yeah.
but good on him to make it feel like that is exactly what he's doing, but you're right, he has a team that take it with Descript, they clip it out, they put it on TikTok, they put it on video clips, they do everything, and that is a 20-hour, maybe 30-hour process, right?
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, just so you know, I have a little thing in my head because I'm quite simple, 5 Ps, and that helps me structure any tool or any part of the podcast process. So pre-production, production, post-production, promotion, and profitization. And when you have those 5 buckets, you go, "Oh, that tool fits into this one. That tool does those 3 things. That tool does that one. Okay, I get where you fit in my process, of course, of producing podcast."
So where does podcasting 2.0 fit in those P's, and how does it change things?
It fits in post-production and it fits in promotion and fundamentally in profitization quite a lot as well. So if you now look at podcasting 2.0, there are 27 tags currently, features that you can add to your RSS feed that make it richer. So that's what you can do. So we've talked a little bit about, the person transcripts and those. There are other ones like location tag, which tells you, where was this produced or where am I talking about? There are other tags that aren't going to actually appear in the UI in the value for the user. They are more for the application to understand. So there's tags called medium equals podcasting or medium equals audiobook, and why would you have those? Because what it allows the application to do is say, "Oh, this is a, thriller," right? As opposed to a serialized podcast like we have. Well, I don't want the ending of the book as the latest episode. That would be crazy, right? Because then, that's what Spike Milligan used to do. He used to read the end of a book before he said, "I'd have to read the end of the book in case I died before the end." So he always read the last page first. Um, but you want the last episode or the last serial element of that book to be the end of the episodes. So reverse chronology. So putting medium equals audiobook tells it to change the order. So some of the tags, what I'm trying to say, are not going to be end user obvious benefits. They are application benefits. But the second part we haven't talked about is interactivity. So interactivity is simply means I want to tell the podcaster who I love and listen to a little bit about what they said. I want to give them a message. I want to send them a bit of a clip or something like that. So interactivity is comments in English, right? How do you do that? You can't do it in Spotify. You can't do it in Apple. But now with Podcasting 2.0, there is a comments section. There is a like heart section, right? So I like this, heart it. I want to leave a comment. Brilliant. Tell Neil, yeah, I love that section. That was perfect. Neil then gets it. Oh, now I'm not talking just to a microphone and one person. I actually have an audience that is talking back to me. So those parts are really important, I think, that we start to see those added.
So you're talking about liking, hearting, commenting, and that I've just started getting into YouTube. Obviously, we're recording this on video right now. It's going to go on YouTube. I'm loving that aspect of YouTube, that people can like, comment on it. Like on my other channel, a Vietnam podcast, it's starting to gain a lot of traction on YouTube. And I am absolutely loving seeing those comments about it. A couple of the clients we work with, they're on YouTube and we make their videos and we can see the interaction on there. I think that's something that podcasting has been needing for a long time. Like you'd be able to read the transcript as you're as you're listening, essentially, if even if you have it on mute, I guess.
I think what you're seeing is all these features are being added, but there is a distinction now. So what YouTube have are comments that only work in YouTube. What Spotify have are comments that only live in Spotify, polls that live only in Spotify. In
Mm.
fact, their transcript is only available in a format that is for Spotify. And the same is true of YouTube. The one that Apple produced is actually a podcasting 2.0 standard transcript. So they have followed the 2.0 spec and added a transcript field in the RSS that follows the 2.0 spec. But Spotify and YouTube have closed proprietary standards that aren't transferable into other applications. So this is the big challenge. Now, many people here may remember the browser wars. I mean, if you're old enough like me, um,
I
and
don't
it's
remember this.
Microsoft. Thank you very much for aging me. But in the early days of the internet, you had browser wars, Netscape versus Microsoft, and then it became Google Chrome versus Microsoft IE. And the closed Microsoft standards were way, way, way ahead of everyone else because they could just build it and push it, build and push very quickly. They didn't have to get consensus agreement from the industry. Whereas the open standards groups, the HTML4, HTML5, CSS1, had to work with a larger group of people to get consensus and then build that in. So it always goes slower, but eventually, like the tortoise and the hare, it catches up. And that's what we're seeing. Spotify, YouTube are going ahead with proprietary standards. They're going faster, quicker, and everyone's going, "Oh, look, you can do it over there." But the ultimate goal of podcasting 2.0 with comments is something called cross app comments. So the idea is that comments will live in one of the 18 different small uh, podcasting 2.0 apps, but they can be read by the other apps. So let's say your favorite app is, I don't know, Fountain or Podverse or whatever. My favorite app is TrueFans. I leave a comment on your episode. Now, if you don't use TrueFans, then that's just stuck in TrueFans, right? And conversely, Fountain. But actually, where we're heading to is that those comments will move across between both apps. And so you'll see comments both within TrueFans and Fountain, irrelevant of which app you actually
That is
started playing
amazing.
with.
That is a big difference. I mean, that's so I didn't fully understand that because I fully understand what you're saying. Like you leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube or Apple, you can do it. You're going to see it there. So that is a big problem with podcasting that I see because it's so fragmented and it is very much
Mhm,
dependent on where you listen. So now I'm starting to understand what is podcasting 2.0. I also want to add a thought I just had. I think with that, with the name podcasting 2.0, even for me in the beginning, I felt like it was something brand new. There's not really like a clear line like there's podcasting 1.0 and 2.0. It's just a kind of nomenclature. Is that the right name?
mhm, yep.
For like some new standards that have been added. So I think that for me anyway, that helps me understand it more because to think of it as like something wholly brand new and different is like really crazy. To just go, it's just some new stuff that we've labeled podcasting 2.0. That really helps. But that to me would be unbelievable if we could have something that works across all apps. And so if you, because even right now you leave reviews, you leave a review on Spotify, it's totally different to leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. So that's really exciting. So moving on from that, the most important thing, what every podcaster says, I get it all the time. How can I monetize? And
Mhm.
I mostly try to work with businesses and I tell them to sell their own services and products because it is quite unlikely you're going to be the next Joe Rogan and be able to sell sponsorship. And to sell sponsorship, you've got to be getting so many downloads, whereas you don't need so many to sell your product to your niche. But what's going to change with podcasting 2.0 with that?
Making money, as you said correctly, generally the head of the long tail is where the money is for advertising. You have to have 1,000 CPM, 1,000 users for a CPM, right? And everyone's worried about their downloads. Oh, I've got to have 10,000 downloads, blah, 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 blah. Fine. The Joe Rogans, the Smartlesses of the world, call me daddy, they will always get advertisers because advertiser PR companies are very, to be honest, they're pretty sick, actually. They just look in the top 10, Apple, who's in the top 10? Right. Oh, put some money at them, right? So that's That's never going to be most of us in the long tail where we've got a smaller audience, but it's a very niche audience. And that's what's lovely about podcasting. It is very niche. I mean, the advertiser who produces a wool knitting needle would love to find the podcast of a person talking about knitting, but they can't find them. So they just never advertise. So there is always going to be advertisers for you because 50 people listening to that podcast about knitting is a very targeted audience for that knitting needle company. But those are so hard to do that most people don't. So we have host read ads, we have dynamic ad insertion, and that's what we call traditional advertising, 1.0 advertising. So let me take one step back to go two steps forward. In the early days of the web, there was no micropayment system for the web. And why would we need a micropayments? We have, credit cards, we have PayPal, we have Stripe. Well, the problem is those services take 3 or 4% or more. Apple takes 30%, right? So the problem is if you wanted to make a small micropayment to this podcast and I wanted to give you, Neil, 50p or a pound, right? Or a $1, I couldn't because half of that or a third of that has gone already. And then probably a little bit more of that will go for other fees. So you're not getting the full value that I want to give you. So in 1.0, Netscape, which I used to work for, didn't produce a micropayment system. So Facebook came up and others with hearts, likes, and thumbs up as a sentiment back to the creator of the blog post of the video. Say, I really like what you did. And then everyone chased follows and everyone chased hearts and likes. Scoop those all up and go to your bank manager and say, great, I've got 1 million likes. Can I have a loan, please? And he'll go, not a chance, sir. Go away. Right. So the problem you've got is that they had no real value, but they were the only thing available. So micropayment systems were the big missing part of the web. Forget podcasting, just the web. So they came about a few years ago. I won't go into technical details, but it's basically the ability to take a Bitcoin and strip that down to 100 million of a Bitcoin is a one sat. It's a currency value of one sat. What's one sat worth? 0.0001 of a dollar, right? It's nothing of nothing. And that's the idea. It should be nothing of nothing because you can, you know, give someone 1,000 sats or 10,000 sats, and 10,000 sats is like a dollar. So you're not really giving a massive amount, although the number sounds very big. So we have now created a micropayment system. Okay, so now we've got to make it easy for people to understand how to use the micropayment system, and we've got to give the technology that enables it to get work. So what's been developed is a peer-to-peer wallet system. So you will have a wallet and I will have a wallet. And I'm listening to your podcast and I want to take money out of my wallet and give it directly to your wallet. And I don't want it to go through a third party, PayPal or Stripe or a bank account. It's a peer-to-peer direct. And that works today. The problem we have is twofold. One is terminology. So back in the day when you weren't born, as it seems, um, uh, when the web was born.
No, I think we're not that far off in age, to be honest. I do vaguely remember I had AOL dial-up, like, I grew up without the
Okay,
internet.
okay.
Yeah,
I don't feel so bad now.
yeah.
Um, in the early days of the web, I was working for Netscape in product marketing, and I used to have to tell people, "It's called HTTP. It's a URL. It's a browser. It's called a web," right? And people look at me and go, "I have no idea what you're talking about, Sam. It's rubbish." Now, fast forward to today, when I tell you you need a wallet, they're called micropayments and it's a peer to peer system. And you look at me going, I have no idea what you're talking about. Go away. It's learning that terminology is one thing for the mass market to understand how they can make those payments. Instead of hearts, likes, and thumbs up, I can give you a micropayment, which has more value. So that's the first thing, and that's just happening slowly. The second part is we have to make it easy for people to understand what wallet, how to top up their wallet, how to actually understand what one sat equals. Again, it's a learning term, but it actually works. Last weekend in Nashville, we hosted a live concert in Nashville where all the podcasting 2.0 apps actually broadcast the live show and people who were watching on those apps were actually giving micro payments to the artists. They raised 4 million sats, which is just under $3,000 from people remotely around the world watching through Podcasting 2.0 apps, sending money from their wallets to the artist wallets. And it all
Wow.
worked. And that's where we are today. Is it mainstream? No. Is it going to be something that my father-in-law understands yet? No, but they will. So all I'd say is for monetization, it's a new form of monetization. And for people in the long tail, this is really important. That person with the 50 users who listen to their Wool podcast could then ask those 50 people who are real fans, will you give me some value? Will you give me some micropayments? Because I can't get advertising, because I can't get host read ads, because I can't get sponsorship. But you tune in every week to listen to me. You are my true fans. Please give me something. And generally they will if they know how and it's easy.
It's really, really exciting. So we talked last week and you explained it in detail to me, and I can definitely see it being the future of podcasting, and it's just a really, really exciting time. So go check out TrueFans.fm. You can find all your main podcasts are on there, including mine, a Vietnam podcast, and this one, Smarter Podcasting. And if you want to give me some sats, you can do it. You can try it out for the first time. So please give it to me. But it's a really, really interesting time, I think, for podcasting. The best thing about your analogies there and your stories is earlier this year, we were making a knitting podcast. No joke. The example that
Right.
I actually normally give, I don't know why I do this, but I give it the example of hammers. So if you have a hammers
Mhm.
podcast, there's going to be somebody who's interested in hammers and going to want to buy your hammers. It's just with podcasting, it can be so niche. If you have 50 people listening about knitting or DIY or hammers, you have an active audience. So they're going to support you because they like what you do. So what else are you seeing coming up in the future of podcasting then that's going to be related to podcasting 2.0?
I think one of the things that we talk about is this thing called the live item tag or live podcasting, which is akin to radio, really. So we are, most podcasters when they first get a mic are a little bit nervous. Let's say some are, some aren't, but let's say you are, and you like being able to have a recorded edit so that you can clean up the ums and ers and all that. Now, my background is in radio. Adam Curry's background's in radio. James Criddle's background's in radio. So we're used to doing live if we have to. And that allows us to maybe, have a few ums and ers, but we're fairly fluent in what we want to do. So live item tag is an extra podcasting 2.0 tag, which allows us to basically then broadcast live. And literally, Adam does a show every Friday night. So that's one thing, live. The other thing is the ability to add music to your podcast. Now, this has been a long wanted feature, right? No, we're not adding AC/DC. No, you can't put Madonna or Guns N' Roses or Taylor Swift in your podcast. So Adam Curry, the inventor of podcasting, ex-MTV jock, wanted and has always wanted with podcasting to include a music capability. In effect, what he wants to do is recreate his radio show. So independent music artists are realizing that Spotify is not really paying them. Again, we worry about ads having 1,000 people before we get CPMs or 10,000 downloads. Artists are having to get to 100,000 plays before they get any pay, right? So they're not getting paid. So they worked out that actually RSS is another way of distributing their music. The album art becomes the cover art becomes their album art. The episodes are actually their tracks on an album. And with value for value, the micropayment system, they can then actually ask people to pay them for their music. And they're making more money through that than they are through Spotify or Apple or Amazon. So that's a trend that's happening. The last part of that, though, is we're seeing Adam with a show called Boostergram Ball, for example. These are called music casts as opposed to podcasts. He's able to chat away on his show and then play a music track, chat away, play music, what we call traditional radio, right? But the technology allows you to stream money to Adam's show, but with you, the listener, not even having to know how it works underneath the hood. It's called wallet switching. What happens is the money then goes from Adam's wallet to the artist's wallet, back to Adam's wallet, back to the artist's wallet. And so the artist gets paid by Adam's audience, and Adam gets paid directly by his audience. but in the background underneath the hood, there's some clever technology. So these are the things that are happening. We're seeing something called the alternative enclosure, which allows for you, for example, to include this video and audio in the same feed. There's lots coming. I mean, we are only just scratching the surface. It's brilliant.
Exciting. I didn't realize about the live feature. So that means if you did a live podcast, it would go out across all the apps that you're hosted on immediately. I
Yep.
love that. I think I did hear about that recently because it was a bit of a joke because I definitely heard somebody say, "Is that not just radio?"
Yeah. Well, it is. But it's radio that's not having to be delivered over a proprietary DAB or AM, FM
Mm,
system. It's delivered over the web,
yeah.
and that's the difference.
I do have such deep respect for radio broadcasters because I really enjoy being edited afterwards. Whoever's listening to this right now, you won't understand. We actually haven't. There will be a little bit cut from this. We haven't really. I know we won't need to cut too much from it, but I love having that backup that I can stop and restart or anything like my ums and my ahs if I make them, which I think I'm not too bad at them, but I definitely know I make them, can be edited out. So I have so much respect for radio broadcasters. I listen to radio still that they can just go and deliver a segment or a show live, which is so much pressure. But I do enjoy doing some live stuff as well. So I would definitely use the live tag once it becomes available. So last question, TrueFans. I've checked it out. It's amazing. Is the name based on OnlyFans?
If it makes the same money, the answer is yes. Um, no, it's based on a brilliant blog post by a guy called Kevin Kelly. Now, Kevin Kelly was the guy 10 or 15 years ago, maybe even 2 decades ago, who wrote 1,000 True Fans, which is what is this seminal blog post. So what he said was, when everyone was chasing 1,000,000 likes and 1,000,000 follows and everything, he said, "No, no, 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 no. Stop. What you want is 1,000 True Fans to pay you $10 a month. You have £100,000 real business. So stop going after the mass, focus on the niche and focus on the people who support you, and that will get you a real business." So the original name of True Fans was called Pod Fans, and that was fine. And I thought, yeah, well, Pod Fans, that's great, fans of podcasting. And Adam Curry had a show where he was going, "Oh, there's Podcast Guru, there's Pod Fans, there's Pod this, Pod that, Pod that, Pod that, Pod that, Pod that, Pod that." And I went, "Oh my God, we're just in a bucket of pods, right?" And we are not differentiated, because to the non-trained user who can't, who's new to it, they'll just see pod something and they can't remember us. So when I saw that problem and I remembered my love of Kevin Kelly's thing, 1,000 True Fans, we renamed ourselves to True Fans, not Only Fans. But what's interesting, I mean, last week James and I talked about Patreon, which is another way of making money, right? And Patreon has made, I think, they've announced they've made 350 million, some massive number, which I was like, seriously, how are they doing that? It goes back to what you said, Neil, right at the beginning. They're offering services like merchant stores and subscriptions and exclusive events and ticketing. So when you look at True Fans, we are not a podcasting app. We support podcasts, music, courses, films, audiobooks. So that's all delivered by RSS, but they are different genres of content. We also now have added events, ticketing, merchant stores, a blog. So we like to think of ourselves much more a super app than a podcast app, because what we're trying to do is take elements of Patreon, take elements of Spotify, elements of YouTube, because we do video as well, and smash it all together, but use open standards to deliver it. And that's why we differ from everyone else.
Love it. I'm really, really excited for the future of podcasting. Like I say, it's changed so much since I started because of AI and then new technology like this coming in. It's just going to get more and more exciting. So, Sam, thank you so much. Pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. You heard it here. If you're a super fan, if you love this, then please leave a review. That's the best thing you can do. Share it with someone else. give me a message, send me a comment. It's going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on all the directories. Leave me a review, and it is on TrueFans as well. So go on to truefans.fm, find Smarter Podcasting. You can send me one sat, which is like 0.0000001 of a dollar. But even if you send me that, I will be over the moon and so, so happy. And send me a message if you have a podcast yourself and you want a podcast audit. We do regular podcast audits as well, where I will listen to your podcast and give you a full audit on the audio quality, not on the content. The content is what you do. I'll tell you if I think it sounds good and where I think it can sound better. So, Sam, thank you so, so much for coming on Smarter Podcasting. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thanks, Neil.